When I got off the plane, I bought a bouquet of flowers and enthusiastically invited my colleagues to my house. My plan was to surprise my husband, who was about to celebrate his birthday. However, the surprise ended up being on us. The moment I opened the door, we were greeted by the sight of two naked bodies tangled on the living room sofa. Their vigorous activity was so intense that even with 5 or 6 of us standing there, they didn't notice. My colleagues, caught between awkwardness and curiosity, silently pulled out their phones. A male colleague's quiet exclamation finally alerted the couple. The mistress let out a panic scream, scrambling to cover herself. My husband, instantly deflating, fumbled to grab a throw blanket to hide both of their shame. When he saw me standing there, he roared, "Zoe, why did you bring so many people? Are you trying to humiliate me?" Humiliate him? I felt a mixture of anger and sorrow well up inside me. Without another word, I turned and stormed out. A few days earlier, my husband had texted me, "Honey, I have to work overtime tonight. Don't wait up for me for dinner." I had replied with a simple "okay." Then scrolled through social media, where a post caught my eye. The caption read, "The most romantic thing is holding you in my arms." The accompanying photo featured a candlelit steak dinner, red roses, and 2 hands intertwined. On one wrist was a limited edition watch identical to the one I had given my husband, Daniel. Not long after, I received live updates of my husband and the mistress enjoying their romantic dinner, complete with photos of them kissing passionately in the dim restaurant light before heading to a hotel together. I smirked as I stared at the evidence. Is this enough proof? I texted the investigator. Their reply came swiftly. Not enough. Publicly taken photos cannot be used as evidence in court. They could sue you for invasion of privacy. I was a bit disheartened, wondering where I could capture evidence legally. My own home? That would work. So, I packed up my things and left for a business trip, thoughtfully giving the 2 lovebirds plenty of space. The surveillance footage showed the mistress wearing my silk camisole in my bedroom, on my bed, making out with my husband for what felt like an eternity before reluctantly parting. "Honey, I don't like these curtains," she said with a pout. "Can we replace them with pink ones? And this bed, he's already slept on it. And the wardrobe, I don't like it either." My husband pulled her into his arms and reassured her with a loving tone. "Whatever you want, darling. From now on, you'll have the final say in this house." The mistress pouted again. "But how much longer do I have to wait?" "I can wait, but our baby can't." Gently stroking her stomach, my husband cooed, "Sweetheart, just hang in there a little longer. The payout from the old house demolition is coming soon. Millions. You know." I caught the most important detail. The mistress was pregnant. She was gearing up to force me out. It was my cue to take the stage and orchestrate the classic scene of catching them red-handed. My husband had cheated on me, caught in the act. Not in bed, but on the couch. I became the object of my co-workers' sympathy. There was no screaming, no hysterics. I stayed calm and quietly moved out. Over the next few days, my husband bombarded me with relentless phone calls and long, pleading texts. I didn't block him or reply, leaving him with the illusion that there was still hope. Meanwhile, I read his messages with morbid fascination. "Darling, I was wrong. I still love you. She seduced me. I swear. From now on, you're the only one for me. I made a mistake, one that all men make. You love me so much you'll forgive me, won't you?" My response was cold and direct. "For the sake of both our dignities, let's get a divorce." He refused outright. The next thing I knew, he was waiting for me in my company parking lot, blocking my car. His appearance was both unexpected and predictable. I knew divorce wouldn't come easily. He wouldn't give up such a valuable asset, like me, without a fight. "Honey, are you still mad?" he asked with a pitiful expression. "Go ahead. Hit me. Hit me as much as you want. Once you've let it all out, let's go home." "Okay." Grabbing my hand, he smacked his own face with it. The sound of the slap echoed, and even he seemed momentarily stunned by it. "Do you feel better now? Let's go home," he pleaded, looking at me hopefully. I pulled my hand away and stepped back, creating distance between us. "Daniel, do you think I'm asking for a divorce just to make a scene?" Do you think we can go back to normal after so many people saw you fooling around with another woman in our home? His tone softened, his attitude apologetic. Honey, I swear, you're the only one I love. She came on to me. I was drunk that night. Really? I never meant to betray you. I let out a cold laugh. You never meant to? No. Daniel, you didn't just think about it. You acted on it. Because of you, I can't even hold my head up at work. Every glance my coworkers give me is filled with pity and mockery. I've become a living joke. He clenched his fists, his anger barely restrained. How was I supposed to know so many people would see? If you hadn't brought them to the house without saying anything, none of this would have happened. I laughed bitterly. So what you're saying is, it's my fault you got caught cheating at home? That it's my fault for bringing people and exposing you? That's not what I meant, he stammered. Zoe, stop making a fuss. Okay. Making a scene? Daniel, you still haven't truly understood your mistake. You cheated, betrayed me, and brought your disgusting affair into our home. I've done nothing except ask for a divorce to let you and your mistress be together. Is that what you call making a scene? I am leaving you. No matter what. I turned, got into my car, started the engine, and drove off, leaving him to roar in frustration alone. I drafted a divorce agreement. The house we were living in now had been bought using the money from selling my pre-marriage property, so it rightfully belonged to me. The new house, which was purchased with a joint mortgage, should be split equally. However, Daniel reacted explosively when he saw the agreement, slamming the divorce papers on the table in front of me. He yelled, "You want both the house and the money? Zoe, how greedy can you be? Don't be so shameless." Before I could retort, someone came rushing out of the kitchen, a person I hadn't expected to see. It was his mother, who was supposedly back in her hometown, so he had gone to bring in reinforcements over the past couple of days. She grabbed my hand with a solemn expression. Zoe, dear, every couple has their fights. No argument lasts overnight. You've been upset for days now. Let's calm down and move on. I've made your favorite food. I pulled my hand away and, in front of her, took out a tissue to wipe where she had touched me. My tone was detached as I said, "First of all, I'm not the one making a scene. Your son is the one who cheated, bringing his affair into our home where my colleagues witnessed it. I value cleanliness and refuse to let filth into my life. So please don't try to mediate. Second, didn't you always blame me for being unable to have children? Well, congratulations. Once he signs the divorce papers, you'll get your wish. You'll soon have a grandchild to hold. Or would you prefer for your only grandson in the family to be labeled as illegitimate?" Her eyes lit up at the mention of a grandchild but quickly dimmed as she tried to regain her composure. Zoe, you're the only daughter-in-law I'll ever acknowledge. That other woman has nothing. How could she ever compare to you? I've already told Daniel to cut her off. Once the child is born, you'll be the mother. I promise we'll keep that woman far away from you. I interrupted her fantasy, my tone icy. You expect me to raise someone else's child? The term someone else's child struck a nerve. Her lips twitched as she struggled to suppress her anger. How can you say something so unpleasant? Daniel's child is your child too. One day, that child will take care of you in your old age. Besides, you can't have children of your own. If you get divorced now, your life will be ruined. I'm doing this for your own good. She let out a derisive snort, took off her apron, and sat on the sofa, picking up a cup of tea. She added, even if you insist on divorcing, think about the years you've spent in this family. You haven't made much money. You haven't had any children. And you've wasted the best years of my son's life. We won't ask for compensation, but don't think you'll get to keep the house. I laughed. Like mother, like son. They both spoke with such confidence, as if their words were gospel. Daniel and I had dated for 2 years and been married for 3. From college sweethearts to a wedding. Our friends had all envied us, saying how wonderful it was that I had married for love. At 18, when I became an adult, when I turned 18, my parents had already bought me a small 2-bedroom apartment, paid in full. Daniel's family, on the other hand, wasn't well off, but he was hardworking, ambitious, and treated me with great care. So my family never insisted he buy a car or house. They planned to use my apartment as our marital home. However, Daniel firmly refused. He said no matter how hard life was, he wanted to provide a home for me himself. A few days later, he showed up at my door, holding a warm property deed. Excitedly, he told me it was our new home. I matched his enthusiasm, feeling genuinely happy for him. Daniel had picked the place himself and paid for it on his own. It was a 3-bedroom apartment, close to my workplace. The property was entirely under his name, which didn't bother me at the time. I knew he didn't want people saying he was living off me, so he refused to move into the apartment my parents bought. I understood and accepted it. Besides, according to the law, even if he paid the down payment, the remaining mortgage payments and any appreciation would still count as marital property. So, I didn't care that my name wasn't on the deed. I didn't feel like I was at a disadvantage. That home carried 3 years of happiness. But 6 months ago, I discovered Daniel was cheating. It happened during his company's gathering, which I attended as his spouse. From the moment I arrived, I couldn't shake a strange feeling. One young woman kept looking at me in an odd way. Her smile seemed sweet, but there was a subtle hostility in her eyes. Jealousy, even. She was Daniel's mentee, a pretty, lively, and sweet-talking girl, full of youthful energy. After dinner, she added me on WeChat and playfully winked at me. "Your husband is such an amazing man," she said. "If I ever see anyone giving him trouble, I'll report it to you immediately." Later, I noticed that the mysterious boyfriend she often flaunted on social media had far too many similarities with my husband. In my mind, I imagined countless ways to confront them, storming into their office, slapping her in the face, or exposing their affair to ruin them both. But then what? Would I fight and then pick up the pieces, pretending nothing happened and continuing our life together? Or would we both end up scarred, leading to a bitter and quiet divorce? No, they could hurt me, but I wouldn't let them define me. I was not at fault, and I refused to be reduced to a vengeful, shrieking caricature. I was the victim, and I deserved to handle this with dignity. So, I stayed silent, pretending to be the clueless fool. I even went out of my way to like and comment on her social media posts, praising her boyfriend. All the while, I hired a professional investigator from a shady ad to gather evidence. But photos could be photoshopped, cheating could be denied, and secretly taken photos in public weren't admissible as legal evidence. Proving their affair was far harder than I anticipated. However, there was one undeniable truth: a child. So, I subtly planted the idea in her mind, casually hinting that a woman's ultimate security came from having a child. Unlike me, who hadn't conceived even after 3 years of marriage. Thankfully, the mistress didn't disappoint me. She got pregnant, finally preparing to force my hand. But then they sued me. Can you believe it? The audacity of guilty people suing the victim before the court date arrived. However, they came storming into my workplace, fuming with anger. "Zoe, you vicious woman. What the hell did you do? Why can't the house be transferred?" the mistress screamed, slamming a property deed with Daniel's mother's name on my desk. It looked like they had just wrestled it back from the real estate agency. Typically, after signing a sales contract, agencies would take the deed as part of the process. I glanced at the document, then back at her enraged face. I picked up the deed, brushed off the dust, and smiled. "Ah, I see. The property is no longer under a sales restriction after 2 years. Thanks to the policies these past few years, its value has increased by hundreds of thousands. Naturally, you couldn't wait to sell it and pocket the money. But unfortunately for you, even though your name is on the deed, the property still isn't yours. To sell it, you'll need my consent." Daniel's mother plopped herself onto the ground and started wailing, escalating into a full-blown scene. "Everyone, come and see. This evil woman is trying to steal my house. I don't know what tricks she's used, but she's trying to take my property away from me." Even though Daniel's affair was already public knowledge, the name on the deed wasn't mine. Onlookers began whispering among themselves. I remained calm and composed, a stark contrast to the chaos caused by their tantrums. "Daniel," I said coldly, "wouldn't it be better to handle this with dignity? Look at you, hiding behind your mother, letting her roll around like this. Are you even a man?" Embarrassed by the growing crowd, Daniel yanked his mother off the ground. But as soon as she stood up, she resumed her crying. Woe is me. My evil daughter-in-law is trying to steal my house and force me to my death. What kind of terrible luck do I have to end up with someone so cruel? I crossed my arms and watched her theatrics with an air of detachment. After a while, I finally spoke. The money for the house came from me. I only borrowed your name. Is it wrong for me to take back what's mine? She shot back. That's a lie. I spent my entire life savings on this house. If it's your money, where's the proof? Who in their right mind would buy a house and not put it under their own name? Tell me. Everyone. Does that even make sense? I laughed coldly. So, with just a few words, this house worth over $1 million suddenly became your entire life savings? It's not that I want to look down on you. But do you think your life savings could be worth that much? You're twisting the truth. Trying to steal my property. And then smearing my name in the process. The truth was, I had kept quiet long enough. A year after we got married, Daniel had found a large fixed deposit in my drawer. Money saved from my childhood allowances and educational funds from my parents. Thanks to compound interest over time, the total had grown to over $1 million. When the smaller deposits matured, I consolidated them into a single account. 3 years after our marriage, the fixed deposit matured. Daniel suggested we invest in another property, saying it could be left to our future children. However, we already own 2 properties and didn't qualify to buy another under the existing policies. Daniel, ever resourceful, proposed using his mother's name to purchase it. Plenty of people use this loophole to buy properties, he said. We just need to pay for a year of social insurance for her to meet the requirements. It was clear he had already researched the policies thoroughly. Seeing his eagerness, I agreed. Cash sitting idle was a temptation, after all, and converting it into assets seemed like a better option. Once I gave the green light, Daniel wasted no time bringing his mother over. Together, they quickly handled the qualifications. His mother, despite the scorching summer heat, tirelessly worked with real estate agents to find a property. After much effort, they settled on a well-located, beautifully renovated apartment near the Rongqing West Gate metro station, right at the start of Line 2. The down payment of $150,000 came from my account. The purchase contract, however, was in Daniel's mother's name. Since it was a full cash purchase, there was no need for a loan, making the transfer process relatively simple. To ensure everything could be completed in a single day without multiple trips, we chose to work with an expedited notary. 3 days prior to the transfer, we submitted all the necessary documents for both buyer and seller to undergo a preliminary review. On the day of the transfer, we planned to file, pay taxes, and collect the new deed, all in one go. One day, I needed to transfer the money into Daniel's mother's account, but both she and Daniel came to me in a panic. Mom forgot her bank card PIN, Daniel said, his voice filled with worry. The card got locked, and it'll take 3 days to unlock it. What do we do? The property transfer is scheduled for tomorrow. Without the card, we can't move forward, and getting a replacement card isn't an option right now. The process is too strict, requiring employment proof, which Mom can't provide. I smiled faintly. Oh, really? What should we do then? Meanwhile, I discreetly contacted the real estate agent for advice. The agent quickly broke down the pros and cons from a professional perspective. Daniel cautiously suggested, "Honey, why don't you withdraw cash? It's only 3 p.m., so we should still have enough time. Otherwise, if we miss the transfer deadline tomorrow, we'll have to pay a penalty and lose the $50,000 deposit we already put down." I nodded. All right. The next day, Daniel's mother carried the cash tightly in her arms, clutching it as if someone might snatch it away. At the housing bureau, we took our ticket number, submitted the paperwork in the morning, paid the taxes by midday, and were waiting to pick up the new property deed in the afternoon. While we waited, Daniel suddenly received a phone call. He paced anxiously in circles before turning to me with an apologetic expression. "Honey, something urgent came up at work. You stay here with Mom, and once you've finished everything, take a cab home. I'll head to the office first." After receiving the new property deed, his mother's joy was written all over her face. She clutched the bright red certificate and laughed so hard that her wrinkles seemed deep enough to trap a fly. I can't believe it. I'm an old lady. And I finally have my own house. And it's worth over $1 million. Mom, I said calmly, we're not done yet. There's still one more window where we need to register the final details. Let's finish everything in one go. Oh, of course. Let's get it done right. She agreed enthusiastically. With the promise of her dream fulfilled, Daniel's mother happily signed her crooked signature on the final documents without hesitation. What she didn't realize was that she had just signed a subordinated mortgage agreement and a notarized full power of attorney. The subordinated mortgage assigned all of the property's value to me, while she was the official owner on paper. I was the creditor. For her to transfer or sell the property in the future, I would need to personally lift the mortgage at the Housing Bureau. Essentially, it was like mortgaging a house to the bank. The full power of attorney gave me the right to handle all matters related to the property, including but not limited to selling, renting, taking out loans, or remortgaging it. The real estate agent, knowing that I had funded the purchase in its entirety, saw nothing unusual about this arrangement. However, Daniel and his mother didn't understand the legal intricacies and only cared about the name on the deed. I had no obligation to educate them. After all, without any formal proof that the money used to purchase the house came from my pre-marriage assets, if anything went wrong in our marriage, the house would legally belong to his mother. Even in court, I wouldn't have been able to reclaim it. I wasn't guarding against honest people. I was guarding against schemers. If Daniel and his family were trustworthy, everyone would win. But if they harbored ill intentions, my precautions would protect the savings my parents had spent decades accumulating for me. Looking back, I had made the right choice when they forced me to withdraw cash to buy the house, leaving me no chance to document my contribution. Their intent to seize my assets had already been clear. Wretched woman. You venomous snake. Daniel's mother screamed, her face twisting with rage. You'll die a horrible death for scheming against me. How dare you? My house. You're trying to kill me. Give me back my house. Daniel's mother wailed as she threw herself to the ground, rolling around in another of her signature tantrums. I watched it all as though it were a performance, keeping my composure. In their rush to transfer the property, they had listed the house for sale at a price significantly below market value. They signed a sales contract and accepted a $50,000 deposit from the buyer. However, because I refused to release the mortgage and approve the transfer, the buyer grew frustrated, causing chaos with the real estate agency and demanding a refund of their deposit, along with double the amount as compensation for breach of contract. The agency called me to negotiate, and I reassured them, don't worry, process the refund and cancel the sale. Let my mother-in-law handle the penalty payment. In the end, Daniel's mother had no choice but to grit her teeth, hold back tears, and return the $50,000 deposit, along with an additional $50,000 in compensation. Although she was furious, she had to comply. After all, this was just the beginning of their problems. Spending $50,000 to shatter their $1 million property dream was, at best, a harsh wake-up call. Soon, our divorce case went to court. Strictly speaking, it was a property division case. Daniel's lawyer argued that all jointly owned property acquired during the marriage should be divided equally. He also claimed that the house we were currently living in was Daniel's premarital property, and therefore excluded from division. One issue at a time. First, the property we had purchased during our marriage. The opposing side presented clear evidence. The marriage certificate preceded the property deed, proving that it was purchased during our marriage, and thus constituted marital property. However, I countered that the funds for the purchase came from the sale of my premarital property, a small 2-bedroom apartment. I had added some additional money to buy the new house, making it my personal premarital asset that should not be subject to division. Although I had maneuvered to secure the apartment under Daniel's mother's name, this property was undeniably purchased during our marriage. Some funds used were marital earnings, which made it technically joint property. But under the law, if the proceeds from selling a premarital property were used to buy a new home, and that property was registered solely under one party's name, it remained premarital property. Daniel and his mother, full of confidence, sneered, "The law is the law. even if the money came from selling your premarital property, as long as some of it was supplemented by marital earnings. It's considered joint property. You'll just have to accept it. Seeing their smug expressions, I had to resist the urge to drop all pretense and punch him. Instead, I sneered coldly. Daniel, so that's why you sweet-talked me into selling my apartment and upgrading to a more expensive one? You plan to split my property all along. What long arms you have to reach this far. Daniel only grew more brazen, smirking as he said, Zoe, keep it classy and stop slandering me. I hope you maintain some dignity in the end. I replied, I have proof that this house is my personal property. To preserve Daniel's pride early in our marriage, we had moved into the house he purchased. I rented out my small apartment instead. Last year, Daniel suggested selling the apartment to upgrade to a larger property in a better location. It's not worth keeping a small apartment that doesn't generate much rental income, he reasoned. After some thought, I agreed, but I also informed my parents and consulted a professional real estate agent. Even after selling my premarital apartment, I kept the proceeds untouched in my account. When it came time to buy the new house, my parents stepped in to help with additional funds, showing their financial strength. As my parents often said, that apartment was your safety net. It's okay to sell it, but the money is yours. If you ever don't want to work, you can spend that money however you like. If you want a bigger house, we'll buy it for you. What Daniel had carefully plotted as a way to turn my premarital asset into joint property had been completely foiled by my overprotective parents. They had always seen me as their precious daughter and refused to let me suffer even the slightest loss. As for Daniel and his mother, they never expected my parents' foresight would render all their schemes meaningless. Daniel liked to keep things in his favor, so at the time of the purchase, we signed a notarized gift document. This declared that the funds for the house had been fully provided by my parents as a gift to me, making the property my personal asset not subject to division. I submitted evidence of the bank transfers from my parents and the notarized gift certificate. Once again, Daniel and his mother's schemes fell apart. They were so enraged that they yelled in court, even attempting to charge at me. Zoe, you vile woman. You tricked me. You've been plotting against me all along. How could you be so conniving? Daniel's outburst made him lose the last shred of dignity he had left. I smiled faintly. Not as cunning as you. I don't intend to harm anyone, but I'll protect myself. If I hadn't safeguarded my property, my parents' hard-earned money would have been taken to fund your dreams of prosperity. I managed to retain the house, but Daniel and his mother refused to accept the outcome. They requested a recess to gather more evidence. Losing 2 properties in succession left them so desperate that they couldn't stop fretting. While awaiting the next court session, Daniel appeared to have had some kind of epiphany. Suddenly, he became overly attentive, sending me morning and evening greetings and flooding me with stories of divorced women living miserable lives. Zoe, he wrote, you're not young anymore. You're not a 20-something girl. Plus, you can't have kids, and you're just average looking. If it weren't for your family's wealth, you'd never have found someone like me. And now, you're throwing it all away? Do you really want to give up on all our years together over something so trivial? He continued, you can't even do housework or cook. Without me, you'd be eating unhealthy takeout every day. Do you really think you can live without the meals I've prepared for you? Zoe, I know you're just mad that I had a fling, but I didn't love her. She's not as kind and gentle as you. She only ever asked me for money. My heart is still with you. Stop being petty. Think about how bad this will look if word gets out. Then came his final plea. Come back, and I'll dedicate myself to you completely. Let's just pretend this evens things out. Okay? Didn't you always want me to take you to watch the sunrise? Let's do it. Or we could go see the ocean. You've never been to the ocean, right? Let's go to Sanya. Or even Thailand. I'll teach you how to dive. I stared at his long-winded message on my phone, pausing for a moment before typing a single word. Okay. Daniel immediately replied with an enthusiastic itinerary for a diving trip by the sea, even booking plane tickets. I laughed coldly and stopped responding. I waited. I wanted to see just how far he would go for the sake of a house. And yes, for the house, Daniel was willing to commit murder. Egged on by the mistress and silently approved by his mother, Daniel planned to kill me. In a video I obtained, The mistress and Daniel discussed their plan with excitement, brainstorming ways to reclaim the 2 houses they had lost. Since legal methods wouldn't work, they came up with an alternative: inheritance. If I were to accidentally die, my properties would become part of my estate. With Daniel as my legal heir, they decided on 2 methods: taking me diving and ensuring I accidentally drowned, or pushing me off a mountain during a sunrise hike, ensuring that I was so badly injured there wouldn't be much left of me. They even discussed maximizing their gains. Not only would Daniel inherit my properties, but they also plotted to sue the tourist attractions for compensation. However, there was one hurdle: my parents. As they were still alive, they were also first-in-line heirs, which meant Daniel wouldn't get the entire inheritance. To counter this, they planned to include documents in our travel insurance forms that would designate Daniel as the sole beneficiary of my estate. The mistress praised the idea as brilliant, and Daniel eagerly agreed. He wanted me to sign the papers, then kill me. If he pushed me off a cliff, there was a chance I might get caught on a tree and survive, ruining his plans. So, he ultimately decided to take me diving. I couldn't swim at all. A total novice. Once underwater, I would be completely at his mercy. He took me to Sanya, where we reminisced by the seaside about the good times we'd shared. "Honey," he asked softly, "have you forgiven me? Let's move forward and make things right." My eyes reddened. "Promise me. Swear that you'll never see that woman again. That you'll never betray me. Swear it on your life. If you do, you'll be struck by lightning and die childless." Daniel immediately raised his hand and swore solemnly. Only then did I smile through my tears. We put on our diving suits and prepared to enter the water. At the last minute, I hesitated. "Maybe we shouldn't go," I said nervously. "What if something goes wrong with the oxygen tank? I can't swim. I could drown." Daniel froze for a moment before reassuring me. "Don't worry. I'll protect you." He then personally checked my oxygen gear and pushed me into the water. Did he want me dead that badly? To make it easier to silence me, he led me far beyond the safe zone to a spot he had prepared in advance. Once there, he suddenly swam up to me, grabbed my arms, and twisted them behind my back. With one hand restraining me, he used the other to rip off my mask and remove my oxygen tank. I struggled desperately, managing to tear off his mask, revealing his ferocious expression. But water gushed into my mouth and throat, and my strength began to wane. Slowly, my body sank. Before leaving, he pressed down on my head, shoving me deeper into the water. When the court reconvened, I arrived fashionably late. The sight of me caused Daniel and his mother to go pale, as if they'd seen a ghost. I waved at them cheerfully and smiled brightly. I didn't mention anything about what had happened at the seaside, instead continuing with the property division proceedings. It didn't take long for Daniel to recover his composure. After all, there had been only the 2 of us in the water. Even if I reported him, there was no evidence. Plus, with our ongoing divorce, it would be easy for him to claim that a heated argument led to an accident during the dive. Even though I knew he had tried to kill me, it was all circumstantial. I had no way to hold him accountable. Regret over his failure to succeed flickered briefly in his eyes, but it was soon replaced by a smug, self-satisfied look. Now, we were discussing the home we had lived in for years. I argued that although Daniel had purchased the house before our marriage, it was a mortgage property. As such, I was entitled to half of the mortgage payments and the property's appreciation. Over the years, the house's value had increased significantly, and I was determined to claim what was rightfully mine. Daniel, however, presented evidence showing that he had fully paid off the mortgage before our marriage. He insisted that the house was a premarital, fully owned property and therefore not subject to division. This was his final victory after losing so much to me twice already. His face brimmed with triumphant malice. "You had it all planned out before we even got married, didn't you?" he sneered. "No wonder. Our family never asked you to buy a house." Daniel's mother sneered. "Yet you rushed to do it. And you lied about needing to pay the mortgage every month, refusing to hand over your salary, just to use our money for household expenses. Was it all so you could play me for a fool?" Daniel's mother spat on the floor dramatically. "You've been living in our family's house rent-free for years. We didn't even charge you rent. That's already a blessing for you. So why do you think you deserve a share? How greedy can you get? I retorted. Your family only has a few scraps to its name. What wealth is there for me to covet? The one scheming to steal someone else's property are you too. Not me. You think a fully paid property from before the marriage can't be divided? Considering how disgusting your tactics have been. I couldn't resist setting things right. Daniel's expression shifted slightly. What do you mean? Are you saying you still have a way to fight for it? I smirked. You know exactly how you bought that house and how you managed to fully pay for it before the wedding. Do you really think I wouldn't find out? They had been so confident that a fully paid house before the marriage would be untouchable as personal property. But their greed had gone too far. It was so blatant that I felt compelled to step in and hold them accountable. I provided evidence in court to prove my entitlement to a portion of the property. After discovering Daniel's affair, I had hired a private investigator to look into him and his mistress. Among the surveillance footage was a recording where Daniel bragged to the mistress, "Don't worry. I'll add your name to the deed later. The house isn't under a mortgage anymore." The mistress asked, "Isn't it a mortgaged property? I thought you couldn't add names to mortgaged houses." Daniel, smugly, replied, "What mortgage? It's a fully paid house. If it were under a mortgage, part of it would go to that woman after the divorce." The mistress's eyes sparkled with admiration. "You're amazing. Daniel, you even bought the house outright." Daniel continued, "To be honest, I didn't have the money for that. I used a bridge loan to pay off the mortgage in one go, so it would qualify as fully paid and count as my premarital property. After we got married, I used our joint funds to pay off the bridge loan. Isn't that perfect? The house is safe, and she'll never get a piece of it. That idiot still thinks I'm paying off the mortgage every month." "Ha! Wow, Daniel, you're so clever." The mistress gushed. That was when I realized Daniel had been using me from the very beginning. He had manipulated me into taking on joint debts to pay for his house while plotting to seize my assets. Using the moment when Daniel wasn't on guard, I took our marriage certificate, his ID card, and his bank card to access his transaction history. I uncovered every transfer, money spent on the mistress, money sent to his mother, and payments made to the bridge loan company. I even visited the bridge loan company and obtained a copy of the original contract, proving that the funds had been used to pay off the house's mortgage with our joint marital assets. This made the loan repayments and the house's appreciation legally considered marital property, subject to division. "Zoe, how dare you investigate me?" Daniel roared in fury, slamming his hands on the table. I smiled calmly. "Daniel, if you weren't trying to cheat me, what would you have to fear? Keep your composure." Under the murderous glares of Daniel and his mother, the court ruled that I was entitled to half of the mortgage repayment and appreciation value of the house, while the house itself remained with Daniel. He was required to pay me compensation. However, given his family's financial state, they couldn't possibly afford to pay me outright. I proposed a solution. The house would be transferred to me. I compensated Daniel for half the original down payment and the appreciated value of the house in cash, and the court approved our divorce. With that, the months-long divorce case finally came to an end. When I received the divorce decree, I knew the drama wasn't over yet. After his crushing defeat in court, Daniel turned into a relentless nuisance, calling and messaging me daily with long, pathetic pleas. "Zoe, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. I swear I'll never stray again. You're the only one I've ever loved. How could you bear to throw away all these years we've had together? I know you still love me. Let's remarry." "Okay," I replied once. "What? So I can come back and be your charity case again? Do you think I have gullible idiot stamped on my forehead? Or are you just hoping for another chance to ruin me?" He quickly followed up with more excuses. "Zoe, you have to believe me. What happened at the beach was an accident. I was trying to save you, but you were struggling so much. If I hadn't left, we both would have died. I swear I was thinking about your parents, how someone needed to be there for them. Thank God you survived." I coldly watched his pathetic performance, wondering how he thought I could possibly believe him. Did he really think I was stupid? If I hadn't taken swimming lessons in secret beforehand, dreaming of a romantic underwater adventure with him, I would have died that day. I gave him a mocking smile, one that said, "Take care of yourself." And then I deleted his number and blocked him everywhere. With the defensive battle over, it was time to go on the offensive. I filed a lawsuit against his mother, submitting new evidence to the court. During our marriage, she had used countless excuses to demand money from Daniel, who claimed he had no spare cash because all his earnings were going toward the mortgage for our living expenses. Naturally, as the dutiful daughter-in-law, I had provided the funds. One time it was for medical bills, another time for repairs to the family's ancestral graves. Over 3 years of marriage, I had transferred a total of $15,000 from my account to hers. Even the wedding gift money we received had been taken by her, under the pretext of needing to repay debts incurred for my grand wedding. But I'm wealthy, not stupid. Each transfer I made was carefully noted with a description, explicitly stating that it was a loan to Daniel's mother. She only cared about receiving the money and never paid attention to the fine print. This made the transactions legally documented loans, not gifts. Therefore, they were subject to repayment. When Daniel's mother claimed she couldn't repay, I requested the amount be deducted from the property compensation she was to receive. This meant $15,000 less for them. Or as I saw it, $15,000 I had thrown to the dogs and successfully reclaimed. I knew most of the money had been used to pay back the relatives they had borrowed from to cobble together the down payment for their house. Out of the $40,000 down payment, $30,000 had come from loans pieced together from various sources. After the wedding, Daniel sent small monthly payments to his mother, who also siphoned money from me under various pretexts to repay those debts. Based on my investigation, they still owed about $10,000. Thanks to the compensation for the house, which included appreciation value, they could finally pay off all their debts. With the remainder, they could even afford a smaller house on a mortgage and live comfortably. I compensated Daniel for half the original down payment and the appreciated value of the house in cash, and the court approved our divorce. With that, the months-long divorce case finally came to an end. When I received the divorce decree, I knew the drama wasn't over yet. After his crushing defeat in court, Daniel turned into a relentless nuisance, calling and messaging me daily with long, pathetic pleas. "Zoe, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. I swear I'll never stray again. You're the only one I've ever loved. How could you bear to throw away all these years we've had together? I know you still love me. Let's remarry." "Okay," I replied once. "What? So I can come back and be your charity case again? Do you think I have gullible idiot stamped on my forehead? Or are you just hoping for another chance to ruin me?" He quickly followed up with more excuses. "Zoe, you have to believe me. What happened at the beach was an accident. I was trying to save you, but you were struggling so much. If I hadn't left, we both would have died. I swear I was thinking about your parents, how someone needed to be there for them. Thank God you survived." I coldly watched his pathetic performance, wondering how he thought I could possibly believe him. Did he really think I was stupid? If I hadn't taken swimming lessons in secret beforehand, dreaming of a romantic underwater adventure with him, I would have died that day. I gave him a mocking smile, one that said, "Take care of yourself." And then I deleted his number and blocked him everywhere. With the defensive battle over, it was time to go on the offensive. I filed a lawsuit against his mother, submitting new evidence to the court. During our marriage, she had used countless excuses to demand money from Daniel, who claimed he had no spare cash because all his earnings were going toward the mortgage for our living expenses. Naturally, as the dutiful daughter-in-law, I had provided the funds. One time it was for medical bills, another time for repairs to the family's ancestral graves. Over 3 years of marriage, I had transferred a total of $15,000 from my account to hers. Even the wedding gift money we received had been taken by her, under the pretext of needing to repay debts incurred for my grand wedding. But I'm wealthy, not stupid. Each transfer I made was carefully noted with a description, explicitly stating that it was a loan to Daniel's mother. She only cared about receiving the money and never paid attention to the fine print. This made the transactions legally documented loans, not gifts. Therefore, they were subject to repayment. When Daniel's mother claimed she couldn't repay, I requested the amount be deducted from the property compensation she was to receive. This meant $15,000 less for them. Or as I saw it, $15,000 I had thrown to the dogs and successfully reclaimed. I knew most of the money had been used to pay back the relatives they had borrowed from to cobble together the down payment for their house. Out of the $40,000 down payment, $30,000 had come from loans pieced together from various sources. After the wedding, Daniel sent small monthly payments to his mother, who also siphoned money from me under various pretexts to repay those debts. Based on my investigation, they still owed about $10,000. Thanks to the compensation for the house, which included appreciation value, they could finally pay off all their debts. With the remainder, they could even afford a smaller house on a mortgage and live comfortably. I compensated Daniel for half the original down payment and the appreciated value of the house in cash, and the court approved our divorce. With that, the months-long divorce case finally came to an end. When I received the divorce decree, I knew the drama wasn't over yet. After his crushing defeat in court, Daniel turned into a relentless nuisance, calling and messaging me daily with long, pathetic pleas. "Zoe, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. I swear I'll never stray again. You're the only one I've ever loved. How could you bear to throw away all these years we've had together? I know you still love me. Let's remarry." "Okay," I replied once. "What? So I can come back and be your charity case again? Do you think I have gullible idiot stamped on my forehead? Or are you just hoping for another chance to ruin me?" He quickly followed up with more excuses. "Zoe, you have to believe me. What happened at the beach was an accident. I was trying to save you, but you were struggling so much. If I hadn't left, we both would have died. I swear I was thinking about your parents, how someone needed to be there for them. Thank God you survived." I coldly watched his pathetic performance, wondering how he thought I could possibly believe him. Did he really think I was stupid? If I hadn't taken swimming lessons in secret beforehand, dreaming of a romantic underwater adventure with him, I would have died that day. I gave him a mocking smile, one that said, "Take care of yourself." And then I deleted his number and blocked him everywhere. With the defensive battle over, it was time to go on the offensive. I filed a lawsuit against his mother, submitting new evidence to the court. During our marriage, she had used countless excuses to demand money from Daniel, who claimed he had no spare cash because all his earnings were going toward the mortgage for our living expenses. Naturally, as the dutiful daughter-in-law, I had provided the funds. One time it was for medical bills, another time for repairs to the family's ancestral graves. Over 3 years of marriage, I had transferred a total of $15,000 from my account to hers. Even the wedding gift money we received had been taken by her, under the pretext of needing to repay debts incurred for my grand wedding. But I'm wealthy, not stupid. Each transfer I made was carefully noted with a description, explicitly stating that it was a loan to Daniel's mother. She only cared about receiving the money and never paid attention to the fine print. This made the transactions legally documented loans, not gifts. Therefore, they were subject to repayment. When Daniel's mother claimed she couldn't repay, I requested the amount be deducted from the property compensation she was to receive. This meant $15,000 less for them. Or as I saw it, $15,000 I had thrown to the dogs and successfully reclaimed. I knew most of the money had been used to pay back the relatives they had borrowed from to cobble together the down payment for their house. Out of the $40,000 down payment, $30,000 had come from loans pieced together from various sources. After the wedding, Daniel sent small monthly payments to his mother, who also siphoned money from me under various pretexts to repay those debts. Based on my investigation, they still owed about $10,000. Thanks to the compensation for the house, which included appreciation value, they could finally pay off all their debts. With the remainder, they could even afford a smaller house on a mortgage and live comfortably. I compensated Daniel for half the original down payment and the appreciated value of the house in cash, and the court approved our divorce. With that, the months-long divorce case finally came to an end. When I received the divorce decree, I knew the drama wasn't over yet. After his crushing defeat in court, Daniel turned into a relentless nuisance, calling and messaging me daily with long, pathetic pleas. Zoe, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. I swear I'll never stray again. You're the only one I've ever loved. How could you bear to throw away all these years we've had together? I know you still love me. Let's remarry. Okay. I replied once. What? So I can come back and be your charity case again? Do you think I have gullible idiot stamped on my forehead? Or are you just hoping for another chance to ruin me? He quickly followed up with more excuses. Zoe, you have to believe me. What happened at the beach was an accident. I was trying to save you, but you were struggling so much. If I hadn't left, we both would have died. I swear I was thinking about your parents, how someone needed to be there for them. Thank God you survived. I coldly watched his pathetic performance, wondering how he thought I could possibly believe him. Did he really think I was stupid? If I hadn't taken swimming lessons in secret beforehand, dreaming of a romantic underwater adventure with him, I would have died that day. I gave him a mocking smile, one that said, "Take care of yourself." And then I deleted his number and blocked him everywhere. With the defensive battle over, it was time to go on the offensive. I filed a lawsuit against his mother, submitting new evidence to the court. During our marriage, she had used countless excuses to demand money from Daniel, who claimed he had no spare cash because all his earnings were going toward the mortgage for our living expenses. Naturally, as the dutiful daughter-in-law, I had provided the funds. One time it was for medical bills, another time for repairs to the family's ancestral graves. Over 3 years of marriage, I had transferred a total of $15,000 from my account to hers. Even the wedding gift money we received had been taken by her, under the pretext of needing to repay debts incurred for my grand wedding. But I'm wealthy, not stupid. Each transfer I made was carefully noted with a description, explicitly stating that it was a loan to Daniel's mother. She only cared about receiving the money and never paid attention to the fine print. This made the transactions legally documented loans, not gifts. Therefore, they were subject to repayment. When Daniel's mother claimed she couldn't repay, I requested the amount be deducted from the property compensation she was to receive. This meant $15,000 less for them. Or as I saw it, $15,000 I had thrown to the dogs and successfully reclaimed. I knew most of the money had been used to pay back the relatives they had borrowed from to cobble together the down payment for their house. Out of the $40,000 down payment, $30,000 had come from loans pieced together from various sources. After the wedding, Daniel sent small monthly payments to his mother, who also siphoned money from me under various pretexts to repay those debts. Based on my investigation, they still owed about $10,000. Thanks to the compensation for the house, which included appreciation value, they could finally pay off all their debts. With the remainder, they could even afford a smaller house on a mortgage and live comfortably. I compensated Daniel for half the original down payment and the appreciated value of the house in cash, and the court approved our divorce. With that, the months-long divorce case finally came to an end. When I received the divorce decree, I knew the drama wasn't over yet. After his crushing defeat in court, Daniel turned into a relentless nuisance, calling and messaging me daily with long, pathetic pleas. Zoe, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. I swear I'll never stray again. You're the only one I've ever loved. How could you bear to throw away all these years we've had together? I know you still love me. Let's remarry. Okay. I replied once. What? So I can come back and be your charity case again? Do you think I have gullible idiot stamped on my forehead? Or are you just hoping for another chance to ruin me? He quickly followed up with more excuses. Zoe, you have to believe me. What happened at the beach was an accident. I was trying to save you, but you were struggling so much. If I hadn't left, we both would have died. I swear I was thinking about your parents, how someone needed to be there for them. Thank God you survived. I coldly watched his pathetic performance, wondering how he thought I could possibly believe him. Did he really think I was stupid? If I hadn't taken swimming lessons in secret beforehand, dreaming of a romantic underwater adventure with him, I would have died that day. I gave him a mocking smile, one that said, "Take care of yourself." And then I deleted his number and blocked him everywhere. With the defensive battle over, it was time to go on the offensive. I filed a lawsuit against his mother, submitting new evidence to the court. During our marriage, she had used countless excuses to demand money from Daniel, who claimed he had no spare cash because all his earnings were going toward the mortgage for our living expenses. Naturally, as the dutiful daughter-in-law, I had provided the funds. One time it was for medical bills, another time for repairs to the family's ancestral graves. Over 3 years of marriage, I had transferred a total of $15,000 from my account to hers. Even the wedding gift money we received had been taken by her, under the pretext of needing to repay debts incurred for my grand wedding. But I'm wealthy, not stupid. Each transfer I made was carefully noted with a description, explicitly stating that it was a loan to Daniel's mother. She only cared about receiving the money and never paid attention to the fine print. This made the transactions legally documented loans, not gifts. Therefore, they were subject to repayment. When Daniel's mother claimed she couldn't repay, I requested the amount be deducted from the property compensation she was to receive. This meant $15,000 less for them. Or as I saw it, $15,000 I had thrown to the dogs and successfully reclaimed. I knew most of the money had been used to pay back the relatives they had borrowed from to cobble together the down payment for their house. Out of the $40,000 down payment, $30,000 had come from loans pieced together from various sources. After the wedding, Daniel sent small monthly payments to his mother, who also siphoned money from me under various pretexts to repay those debts. Based on my investigation, they still owed about $10,000. Thanks to the compensation for the house, which included appreciation value, they could finally pay off all their debts. With the remainder, they could even afford a smaller house on a mortgage and live comfortably. I felt a twinge of sadness but quickly refocused. Next, I filed a lawsuit against Daniel's mistress, demanding repayment of every penny Daniel had spent on her during our marriage, from expensive designer bags and rental payments to every meal, date, movie ticket, hotel stay, bouquet of roses, and even cups of milk tea. Everything needed to be repaid. In their year-long affair, the total amounted to just over $10,000. I didn't bother with rounding down. As a result, I reduced the compensation owed to them by over $5,000. Meanwhile, the mistress, pregnant with their so-called golden heir, confirmed at a local clinic that she was carrying a boy. Left with no choice, Daniel begrudgingly accepted the court's ruling. With the judgment in hand, Daniel and his mother were forced to comply with my demands, including transferring the house they'd put in her name back to me. The house was sold to its original buyer for the same price, though technically, they also owed an additional $5,000 penalty for breaching the contract. Ironically, I made a profit on the house, netting tens of thousands of dollars after all the deductions. Once everything was finalized, I transferred $45,000 to Daniel as his share and leaked to the mistress that Daniel had received this money. Predictably, the mistress pushed Daniel into marriage. They used the remaining $35,000 as a down payment for a modestly located, small house. She eventually gave birth to a son, and Daniel now had a house, a wife, and a child. Their little family seemed perfect, at least on the surface. But seeing them happy didn't sit well with me. If I was unhappy, I had to act. I compiled evidence of Daniel's infidelity, financial misconduct, and his scheme to steal my assets and sent it to his employer. The result? Both he and the mistress lost everything. The mistress had resigned earlier under the guise of maternity leave, narrowly avoiding a direct firing. With Daniel's high-paying job gone, their shiny new house fell into disrepair before they even had a chance to settle in. The mistress, overwhelmed with caring for a constantly crying baby, and Daniel, drowning in despair, fell apart. Daniel, now jobless and spiraling, turned to alcohol. Bitter and resentful, he blamed everything on the mistress. "If it weren't for you," he lamented, "I'd still be with Zoe. I'd have multiple properties, a luxury car, and a wealthy, devoted wife. I could have had it all." The mistress, who thought she had landed a young, promising husband with a house and car, realized too late that she had tethered herself to a broke, freeloading con artist. Their once rosy relationship devolved into constant fighting. Their life became chaotic and miserable. I couldn't resist a smirk and decided to play my trump card. I sent Daniel a copy of his old infertility test results from our premarital health check. The results, long buried, revealed that he was incapable of fathering children. The revelation shattered what little remained of their relationship. The mistress, enraged, attacked him in a fit of fury, leaving him with fractured ribs and bruises. In retaliation, Daniel lashed out, permanently disfiguring her face. It wasn't long before she contacted me, her desperation palpable. "Take him back," she begged. "Give me $100,000, and I promise you'll never see me again." I laughed. "Daniel's worth that much to you? Garbage belongs in the trash. You two can rot together." Satisfied that the mistress had received her just desserts, I moved on to my final act. I reported Daniel to the police. Thanks to the private investigator I had hired, I had high-resolution footage clearly showing Daniel holding me underwater, ripping off my mask, removing my oxygen supply, and pressing me down. The evidence captured his twisted, murderous expression in full clarity. Unsurprisingly, Daniel was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to prison. The mistress, now unrecognizable and burdened with a child, tried to seek help from her estranged family, only to be turned away. With her looks gone, she lost the one thing she had always relied on to manipulate others. Daniel's house, which had been mortgaged, went into foreclosure and was auctioned off. His mother, who had schemed endlessly, ended up with nothing. Her son was in prison. The precious grandson was gone. The house was lost. I could only imagine how colorful her old age would be, steeped in poverty and regret. From catching him in the act to safeguarding my assets and punishing the scumbag took an entire year. Although it was time-consuming and exhausting, I finally rid myself of that man and protected what was rightfully mine. In marriage, we may not always seek to calculate gains and losses, but it's essential to protect ourselves and our family's assets. The law is fair and just, and we must learn to use it to safeguard our legal rights.